Coming up, as we look for silver linings in the Brooklyn Nets' upcoming season, could Cam Thomas claw his way into the most improved player category? And why not? Second-year man Noah Clowney. Let's get in the mix, all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free, excuse me, on all those great platforms. I always get choked up about free content, but today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, it's just an emotional time. We're talking about Cam Thomas, the possibility that he could win most improved player in the upcoming season. And that's difficult, man. It's hard for me to get all those words out.
Oh, we're digging deep, buddy. Look, it's the off season. We're rolling through this 5 days a week, Nets content for a season where they're going to be, I would say, behind
Really
it a little bit in terms of the wins, but that's okay. There's a lot of stuff we're going to be able to draw on from this season, whether it's the team, whether it's the play of Cam Thomas, whether it's looking ahead to the draft. A lot of exciting stuff going on there. Can't wait for college basketball season to start to get a look at some of these guys also. But when we talk about like things to look forward to in this coming season, obviously at the front of everyone's mind is like, what kind of leap could Cam Thomas potentially take here as, you know, easily the best scorer on the team. That one's not close. And then possibly looking as maybe more of like a floor general if he just has the ball in his hands more and he's just going to be facilitating more of the offense. And if you think that that's going to be the kind of leap that he's going to take, and it's going to statistically kind of bear itself out into like sort of like this more well-rounded, at least offensive player, then maybe we do want to start looking at most improved player awards. And you know, our friends over at FanDuel have the odds up right now. He's there. I mean, 14th overall. We'll go through some of the list of guys above him. And this is an award that has a lot of big subjective nature to it, right? About like what exactly it means to be most improved. But you know, when you hear that, you know, do you put Cam Thomas in that group of guys that could potentially take this kind of leap, which essentially means an agreement among NBA people that he's like of the next caliber of player. And I like on a high level, I think that's like what that award like that kind of signals.
It's maybe worth noting that in 2023-24, Cam Thomas finished 7th in most improved player. So there is at least a history track record here that he was on the radar for this a season ago. That could actually work against him potentially, because when you talk about the things that would matter for him to be able to get into this category, obviously it was the scoring a year ago that got him there. So really, when you talk about being 14th right now, and if you could make a move up this board over the course of the upcoming season, I think it would come down to those other categories, right? It's going to come down to the assists, which we saw take a big uptick over the back end of the season. The field general, as you mentioned, being on the court and maybe being able to run the offense more consistently, some more point guard work is probably going to be the thing required. And I maybe wonder too, I'm just listing out all the things that would be critical here, because I don't think we're going to see him go be a 30-point scorer this upcoming season. So the point totals are going to be somewhere in that range, right? If he's 25-point scorer, he's going to be top 10 in the league. I wonder if the defensive part of it will matter in a conversation like this in terms of being able to move the needle beyond you score a lot of points. Hey, a lot of guys score a lot of points, right? Maybe your assists go up. Great. A lot of guys can facilitate. I wonder if they'll get into the weeds on those type of details for a player like Cam Thomas, because it's the one area that you don't talk about at all with his game, because it's the least important part to him being successful on the court.
Yeah, so I actually think that for this particular award matters less than another issue, which is like the team just not being good enough, right? And I think that, you know, if we're trying to what's that?
And then there's that part of it. The Nets are having 18.5 over under win.
It's not a prerequisite that your team is good to win most improved player, but it sure helps. And if you look back, and we'll go through some of the people that he's maybe possibly competing against, but just a quick look back to the award, who has actually won it over the last, let's say, 6-7 years. Tyrese Maxey won it last year, where he takes a leap on a very good Philly team. The year before that, maybe the comp we're looking for is Lauri Markkanen, where that's a Jazz team that ends up, in the lottery with a losing record, 12 games under 500. And that's just like not a very good team, really, really faded down the stretch. Though they started off really strong, and that really helped them. Before that, John Morant, obviously that was a good Grizzlies team. Julius Randle, the year before that, people forget that he kind of made a leap with the Knicks, although they didn't make it too far. Brandon Ingram before that, Pascal Siakam, Victor Oladipo. Most of those teams are on the decent side, or the teams kind of a little bit outperformed expectation on the back of these guys playing. But a lot of that was like, had much less to do with being like a great two-way player and more of like, I would say, this ascension into the next conversation of players that people talk about in like the top 50 range, let's say, or higher, right? Top 40, top 30 range of player. And I think that is more around what we're talking about with Cam Thomas is like, does he have the ability to enter the conversation as that next tier of guy? And I think the only thing that would stop him, frankly, probably is like a super inefficiency or the team just being so bad that you can't even make a case for it. They're like, hey, they won 15 games. What are you going to do? Could the most improved player be on a team that's that bad? I think that'd be a tough sell.
You know, it's funny too, because you mentioned Brendan Ingram. That was the shortened season, so 30-42 the Pelicans were. So a team, well under 500, excuse me. And then you have guys like Giannis who won it back in 2017 on a Bucks team that was 42-40. But he's a great example on this list of when you're like a transcendent talent and everybody kind of knows that that's the way that it's going, and you have a great season, but it helps, I think, transition that. So I agree with you that I don't think defense is going to make or break the most improved candidacy for Cam Thomas, but it might be more that, do we look at Cam Thomas and say that he's going to be capable of having a transcendent type of offensive season, right? You'd have to be saying that on a bad team over the course of an 82-game season, not only are you probably showing up and playing in almost every game, because that would definitely help you even if you're on a bad team from a record standpoint, but you can't probably afford, while playing on a bad team, to have off nights. Too many. Right? More than, if he had 10 bad shooting performances, and I mean, really, real clunkers where you're talking about going 3 for 15 from the field, those are going to stand out in a way that it'll be harder to overcome because you're not on a better team and you don't have better talent around you. And so the games and the big scoring performances might not come as easy, or your great scoring performances like 2 seasons ago when he had limited opportunity for the Nets came in games when it didn't matter. Hey, 40-point performance. Awesome. You lost. Like that, I think, is going to be a really hard hurdle for him to get over, where big scoring performances aren't correlated to also everyone who votes on these things going, and they won that game because of Cam Thomas. 18.5 over under win total. Cam Thomas was responsible for 16 of the wins that they got this season, right? I think it might require something like that perceptually for him to really get into maybe the top 5 conversation around this.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with all that. And I do think the perception is going to be a big part of the reality also, unfortunately. Though I will say, if you look back at this previous list and you think about sort of like the archetype of player who is winning it and the teams that they're winning it on, I can make a case for like removing some of the players that are above him in the FanDuel odds, right? And I'll go through, after the break here, we'll go through some of these other guys that are right now existing over on FanDuel above him. And we'll take a look at like sort of like what might be some of the differences around some of those guys. We'll do that here in just 1 second. Before we get to that, we'll tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, NFL fans, you can start the season here or keep going with the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you check out the latest stats, you view the live play-by-play. You also so much more on the same page on FanDuel where you place those bets. So important to be able to see it all in one place. And FanDuel has really everything under the sun, from sides to props to in-game stuff. It's all there for you over on FanDuel. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's you're going to get started over there at FanDuel.com. It's America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about most improved player odds, and certainly something that we'd love to see for Cam Thomas, and getting into that conversation, finished 7th a year ago. He's 14th on the list right now over on FanDuel odds. The one thing I'll say before we talk about the guys ahead of him, because I think this, at least for me, is the more important component of this. If Cam Thomas, right now 14th, if he moves up the board in any capacity for most improved player, let's say he finishes 7th again this upcoming season, that means that his game has continued to grow and has expanded and he's improved in other areas. And that's critical to the Brooklyn Nets and what they're going to do going forward. We know you're looking towards the next year's draft class and getting in Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey, whoever it may be. But you also are looking at this roster and saying, who's coming with us? Yes, we think they're going to turn over a lot of who's currently there, but you'd like to have some core guys. And I want to be able to label Cam Thomas that way. I don't think most improved player is going to change me one way or the other on me thinking that he can be a contributor on the next iteration of this team, but it wouldn't hurt, especially if it involves him moving up the board based on what he does as a facilitator to go along with what almost seems like an assumption. Yeah, he'll score 22 to 25 points a night. Can he also do a little bit of the other things? I think that matters to me in this conversation about him being most improved.
And that would be the thing he'd have to prove, right? It can't just be empty scoring stats, which would be
That's
like
what I mean, right?
If the assists and the other thing is if he's able to unlock another part of his game, then that would go a long way to like sort of pushing back against naysayers that are going to make, maybe a correct claim that his game is too one-dimensional on the offensive end. When it's just like, hey, if he has the ball, great, he can score, but if he doesn't have the ball, then what's like really happening? Or if he has the ball, you know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to try to shoot, and he's not really pressing defenses in a way that unlocks a lot of other players around him. Like that, I think. But if the assist rate jumps and like the efficiency there jumps, then you won't be able to say that anymore, right? And so I think that would go a long way.
How many assists do you think it takes? Like because now I'm like thinking about what's the line, right? He comes out of this season and does a 25, 5 and 4. And you're like, okay, that's a really good season. The numbers are right there offensively. We saw the uptick in assists. When we talk about that assist category specifically, I almost feel like you'd have to be saying like averaging 6 assists a game. That would be the thing that starts to move you up there, assuming that he's doing 25 points a night, somewhere in that range, 23 to 25 points a night. You got to probably be able to say that you're giving out 6 assists. And the hard part for that, and they won't include this in their most improved player evaluations, is how many assists could have been if you had, more talented players X, Y, or Z, right? Missed shots and things like that, where maybe he's doing the functional part, but the results are not there because of the team you're playing on.
Yeah, 6 is tough. I mean, that'd be effectively doubling it if you assume the minutes are going to be in that 32 range again, right? Because they're just going to be losing games, or like they're not going to press his minutes too crazy. That would be effectively doubling his assist rate. Now, I will say, if you look back over the course of March of last year, he did average 4.3 assists a game during that stretch. Now, some of that was minutes, like he was in the 40 minutes range a lot. So some of that's just volume more than anything else. But he had a run of 6.4 assists, and we were like, oh, and that it dropped all the way back down, like sort of over the next stretch of games. Yeah. But it was there for a little bit. And like I said, it was a little volume. I think like 5.5 assists where it's like up, 75% or something like that. And with the understanding that it's going to be hard to have assists where the rest of the team can't shoot. Now, you can also raise the assist rate if he's running more pick and roll and he's able to just get like sort of more lob stuff going to some of these bigs. That would actually just increase it also. So I think there's probably a push and pull around his ability to be able to do it, but it would have to be in that range for sure. It has to be over 5 minimum. Like it has to be over 5 absolute minimum. I think it's in the range of outcomes, though not likely. And I think he'll be given an opportunity to do it. And I do wonder if part of like what Jordi Fernandez hopefully is going to stress here this year is like, hey, this has to be part of the game. We're going to try to run offense through you more. And to be able to do that, you just have to be able to do this other stuff, right? Like you just have to play 2-man games with the bigs. You have to run like sort of like 2-4, 2-5 stuff with Clowney, with Claxton, and be able to help them. And then that's going to help you score also more efficiently because it's going to make the shots easier. Like if that's part of how the game is made up, like DHO stuff to get him into just more downhill movement to the basket with the big running with him, like that could be there for him. I don't know, but it would have to be long story short, it would have to be over 5 to me minimum, and 6 is like a doubling assist rate. Is that realistic? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned the sample size there. It was small, very exciting for Nets fans, and then you try to extrapolate on that. Remember, overall in the 51 games that he started, 66 total last season, he averaged 31, little over 31 minutes. So we think about him being certainly up and over that range coming into the upcoming season. And I'll even put the other part of it that probably matters here too. That'll only help him, and I think organically is just going to be a part of his game. In the expanded role that we saw this past season, he got to the free throw line 5 times. So again, okay, get to the free throw line 7 times. Whatever that number needs to be, because he knocks that down at an efficient rate as well. And that factors in as much to, you want to talk about your point scoring and your overall totals. We saw a little dip in total with his 3-point shooting, a little over 36%. He shot 38% the year prior, which really got everyone excited after a relatively quiet rookie year. where he only knocked down 27% from beyond the arc. So all of these things have taken nice little steps. And in the expansion of that role in minutes, we've seen the free throws go up. We've seen the free throw rates go up. So it's really the question you're asking as we're talking about most improved player. It's do we think the ceiling is still out there for him in some of these areas, right? Like, where can we keep pushing for him to continue to be both effective and efficient? Because I think there is the risk you run here with him this season. It's not a knock on him, where just games are rough, nets are down, and he's chucking a lot, right? Like, it's kind of going to be his responsibility to not make the easy plays, which will be my turn, right? There's going to be a lot of my turn opportunities for Cam Thomas. And you mentioned Jordi Fernandez. It's going to be on him to say, it's not about the wins and losses. It's about making the right basketball plays and developing well, which I actually think would strengthen his most improved odds.
Yeah, it's so critical. It's so critical because, again, too, if we assume the team is going to lose a ton of games, which they're going to, this other thing has to come out to be able to, like, go back to what we said before, is like, prove the naysayers wrong. We already know what the naysayers say about his game. They say it's empty calorie stuff. They say nay. Yeah, they say nay. We're saying nay. No, it's empty calorie stuff. It's tons of shots, bad team. It's, we wouldn't be able to fit into a larger offensive system. Like, this is the pushback. And to some degree, based on results, it is hard to make strong cases going the other way. Part of that is just circumstantial. The Nets haven't been a cohesive roster. They've been pretty bad over the last couple of years. The coaching's been rough, to say the least. And Cam Thomas's role has been incredibly inconsistent. And so when you factor all these things together, you get circumstances that make it so that if you're making the case for him, you're kind of just doing it on the belief that it can get all the way there.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're not, and that's really, we're operating on a belief system more than anything else. Now, there have been a group of people that have been way ahead of Cam Thomas, like, believing that he's a much better player than the NBA fans writ large. I'll right here say I was not one of those people, right? Like, I fell into this category of, hey, it's like hard for me to see how this is going to be like a super well-rounded player. So I've always been a lagging indicator of, like, where the game was going, for sure. And I do want to believe it's going to expand, and I'm excited for it. But but if you're trying to make strong cases about it, you were doing it on belief more than, like, much else on an all-around game standpoint.
That's why coming up here in a second, we're going to get into the list of players ahead of him and how he can leapfrog some of those guys relatively easily. But Doug touched on something there that I think matters: the relative performance and the construct of the team over these last few seasons for Cam Thomas, and how that's impacted his ability to maximize what he does on the court. We'll get into that to close out today's episode in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you our friends over at Gametime. Look, you're going to the sporting event, you're going to the concert, you're going to the show, you're going to the comedy, going to see someone stand up. You want to make sure the ticket buying experience is just super, super easy, affordable, and you're getting the best deal out there. That's why you got to head over to Gametime. Gametime's got a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier, and it was already super easy over on Gametime. They're going to filter out the fluff, show you only incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. If you head over to Gametime right now, got all kinds of stuff. You got Cowboys going to the Giants there Thursday, starting at $74. You got I just saw Broncos at Jets starting at $100 there for this Sunday. Orioles at Yankees. I couldn't even believe this when I saw it. $4, starting at $4 right there with Baltimore heading into New York. You're not going to find better deals than this over at Gametime. See the seats before you sit down. Lowest price guaranteed, event cancellation, job loss protection. It's all there for you on Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
All right, so as we close out today's Locked On Nets episode, remind you, after you listen to us first, make your second listen to Locked On NBA podcast. It's news and analysis from around the league with all of your local and national experts breaking it down. And of course, it's a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and it's your team, and it's every single day. Okay.
Real quick, before you get to this next part, because I said, I'm going to, because I don't think we're going to spend too much more time on this, but I want to unlock what you're going to say here.
I know you want.
But yeah. I'm just going to give you the list of the players that are above him right now. Wembanyama, Kuminga, Giddey, Evan Mobley, Jalen Johnson, Jalen Williams, Paolo, Jalen Green, Pajemski, Emmanuel Quickly, Scotty Barnes, Cade, Suggs, Jalen Suggs from the Magic, and then Cam Thomas. Like, that's the list of guys above him. We could spend a whole episode making the case for and against each one of these guys. I will say it's a wide-ranging list of guys at all different tiers though no one probably outside the top 50, except for although some like guys like Pods probably are maybe, and Jalen Green. So actually, I take it back. It's a wide ranging list of guys here that do not fit one archetype around great team, top 50, high draft value, low draft. You know what I mean? Like this list is all over the place.
You have them up in front of you. What's the difference between the 5th odds for most improved versus Cam Thomas's in terms of the disparity between the likelihood?
I mean, it's less than double. So it's like 1,400 plus 1,400 for Jalen Johnson, and Cam Thomas is plus 3,400. I mean, it's big. He's a long shot. Plus 3,400 is a long shot. Wembanyama is easily the favorite here at plus 650. I'll say though, if Wembanyama finishes like 3rd in MVP voting, right? Like, are people going to make the vote twice? I think there's like a voter thing that goes on here too about like where the subjective nature of awards. Good luck trying to figure out where people's heads are with this stuff.
Right.
Because now most times they just go with the crowd. It's like, oh, I heard that Tyrese, he should deserve it. But like, oh, I heard player X is getting it. I'll go with it. I do think there's a big part of that within the NBA media. But good luck trying to figure out some of these ones, it's like who deserves to be there, because it's not like there's no hard and fast rules around this stuff.
Yeah. No, for sure. And actually, you mentioned Jalen Johnson. I actually think that he's a name that I would watch, and that's going to be an interesting one for Atlanta, certainly, as he took a big leap last season. So the one thing that we touched on there too was what's been going on for Brooklyn. There is this part of it where stability matters here. And this comes down to the combination we talked about, still have some veterans, you want to develop youth, like the push and pull for that organizationally is going to impact how Cam Thomas can be in the most improved player category. I think there's a world where if Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson are playing some bigger minutes and Dennis Schroeder, like that's going to make it easier for Cam Thomas to play better. There will be growing pains potentially with Jalen Wilson, with Noah Clowney. Now, I think like by the end of it all, and not even just from a develop young talent and see what you have in these guys standpoint, but by the end of it all, I think the unknown of what's the next lead for Noah Clowney, who we put on this list as probably a, silent, never to be acknowledged most improved player candidate, but how those guys develop does have a one-to-one correlation, I think, to what it's going to look like for Cam Thomas and just the structure that they play in. You start guys, you sit guys, you keep guys, you trade guys. It's like you play big minutes, you don't play any games. I think the consistency that Jordi Fernandez brings to this team, to this roster, in spite of the fact it's going to be a bad year, in spite of the fact you want to and need to do a lot of losing, that's going to impact a young player like Cam Thomas and his ability to go out and get consistent reps and feel like I'm surrounded by typically the same group of players and not randomly pulling in a veteran that hasn't seen the court in 4 games because you want to make sure you lock in that loss on a given Tuesday night.
And I will say the guys that they have around him should help him. I don't think like Schroeder helps him really, because I don't think like being an off-ball guard with Dennis Schroeder like running the offense is going to like do a ton for making like the team super efficient. And that's not a knock on Schroeder. I just don't think that those guys pair very well at all, like from like a basketball standpoint. But if you think about like, I don't know, maybe Ben Simmons is a little healthier or a lot healthier. You have these 2 bigs that can help clean up some mistakes or be possible rim runners if you're trying to get a 2-man game going. Like there are other guys that could help his case here. And again, the point guard does not help him. And I don't think that he's going to like play point guard this year. I know people have like wanted that to be the case. I just don't think. I'd be shocked if that happened this year. Outside of stretches. Or he'd have to like show something a lot, like really show something.
Yeah, probably grow into it. Yeah, here's a small opportunity. Oh, looks good. Here's a bigger opportunity and a bigger if he expanded that way.
Yeah. So some of these other guys should help, and like some of the wing depth they have also, and the fact that they just have no other guards. Like maybe they'll just be no other like real high-end NBA level guards at all. Maybe that just pushes them into the role, and that I think maybe that can help them with some growing pains. But overall, I do think there's a couple guys on the team here who could help him. It's an upward battle. Like it's reflected in the odds. Like he's not favorite to do this, but I think that there's a case where some of this stuff does get unlocked and the coaching does really help. And maybe we've underrated how bad the coaching's been over the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
You get the case with all the firings and the lack of success.
It would sure seem like it hasn't been great based on just head scratching stuff and the fact that these guys aren't going out getting hired anywhere else. 3 coaches, Now, some of them are still under contract, but none of them are landing other huge jobs elsewhere when it comes to coaching, right? So, like,
How
yeah. So
dare
anyway,
you?
maybe
Keep Kenny
that's
Atkinson's
been
name
a
out your mouth.
mitigating
You know what I
factor
mean?
for him. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was saying keep Kenny Atkinson's name out your mouth. That guy's living the dream.
I wasn't
now.
including him. I was including. It was Nash. Vaughn and
Vaughn
Ollie.
and yes, and Kevin Ollie. Sorry. Yeah, you know what? Well, that's life comes at you fast when the Brooklyn Nets are rolling through coaches so quickly. There's been 3 of them in the last 6 months. The last thing is one of the last things I wanted to touch on here was just first that you're talking about in terms of the player that he is. Again, I really enjoy using craftednba.com. They lay out player skill sets in a really efficient way. His creation turnover percentage per 100 possessions, he's in the 73rd percentile for that. His offensive load in terms of assists combined with creation opportunities, field goals, and free throw attempts is in the 89th percentile. Creation alone, box score per 100 possessions, shots created for teammates, 83rd percentile. So, like, he was already knocking on that door. And actually, I'll put it in this context because we're having fun talking about could he win it. But if Cam Thomas is 14th in odds right now and he finishes top 10, that's still a big win for the Brooklyn Nets and a big win for Cam Thomas, right? Like, winning it would be, man, that'd be otherworldly. But if he just does that again, where the expectation of where he is, if he outperforms that and moves the needle on what he is as a player and as a talent for the Nets, then the Nets organization and the fan base can look at it and go, yeah, if you've been a Cam Thomas loyalist this entire time, you're going to say proof has been in the pudding. Here we go, finally. And if you've been slow to it, as Doug or myself maybe were early on in his career, you can say the leaps keep happening here. And finally, you would have 2 years back to back where the consistency of opportunity has been there. And he's rewarded you by saying, I can score, I can improve assists, I can improve in these categories if given the opportunity, unlike those first 2 seasons.
Oh, buddy, we're excited. This is exciting. We'll talk about this all season long. We're going to talk about the growth of the game. Obviously, the contract piece is going to be a part of it as well. Like, is there an extension coming? You know, what is the team maybe waiting to see from him to feel good about that extension? A lot of this is going to play into his play early on, and I think we'll know early on too, sort of like what Jordy Fernandez is getting them to buy in on both ends of the court. Like we said before, the top, look, 5 days a week. Nets are coming at you. They're not going to win a lot of games. They're not going to hold up their end of the bargain with winning. We're going to hold up the end of the bargain 5 days a week. Nets coverage from now through the end of the season. No one else out there is doing it. So it's not even close. It's not even close. Go look at the competitors out there. There are none. There are none. Other good Nets podcasts out there, but no one's even close to the aforementioned volume like we talked about before. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe over on YouTube as well.
Stay afraid, but do it anyway. What's important is action. You don't have to wait to be confident. Just do it, and eventually the confidence will follow. Why that is Carrie Fisher.
Oh, R.I.P., right? Yeah, she's dead.
Just like,
one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow. I said R.I.P. Well, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.